Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 56 of Daffy's Roundtable. On today's episode, we're going to talk about monitors for the first time. We talk about all types of monitors, like the more arid ones, like Kimberly rock monitors, ackies, and savannah monitors. And then we also discuss the more tropical ones, like, of course, tree monitors. And of course, what better guest to have on this episode than the monitor legend himself, Brandon of Canadian Coldblood. We discuss things like Brandon's experiences setting up and breeding these monitors. We talk about enrichment, how important enrichment is. We talk about diet and all sorts of things that you need to know about monitors. This is a super interesting episode that I really enjoyed recording, and I think there's a lot of value in it. So I really hope you guys enjoy it. Also joining us today as my co-host for this episode, Greg from Beneath the Canopy Exotics. But before we get into all of that, allow me to thank Exo Terra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exo Terra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, let's talk monitors. Everybody, please help me welcome Brandon of Canadian Coldblood. All right. Are you ready, Mr. Greg?
Sure. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say, but hope my bald spot. Oh.
Me neither, but we're rolling. Hello!
How's it going, guys?
There we go. Thank you very much for coming on, first of all. We're both super excited for this episode. See, I'm speaking on your behalf already, Greg.
Yeah, because I'm really not, but...
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, I don't think I've even done a monitor episode yet. So this is going to be the first monitor episode, and it's already the ultimate monitor episode. So I think let's dive right in.
So should we post you up high, or should we say, oh, it's the monitor god, Brandon?
No.
Ben Aston. No.
Please.
We want to keep that going. We want to get people to keep calling you that.
No, well, I'm good.
No.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I've been hearing Canadian Coldblood from before I knew you, even from before I was going to the expos and before I even knew what monitors were. So you've definitely made a really good name for yourself. I'll tell you that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been doing it a long time now. now that I look back, only in recent times since I started doing a few podcasts, I'm like starting to think about how long I've had monitors, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm getting.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're getting old now. Yeah, what's that reference?
So that's the perfect transition to the perfect start. How long, or maybe roughly, if you don't want to give numbers, but how long have you been keeping reptiles? How did you get into it? Maybe a quick summary of that story.
Oh, I'm 44 now, so I probably got my first real reptile project when I was about 14, so 30 years ago, I suppose. And they were veiled chameleons, kind of when they were brand new to Canada. And I always loved chameleons, man. So they were, you'd read about them in magazines because the internet wasn't even a thing back when I was 14. So I'd get Reptiles magazine and be always intrigued by what was in there, right? And then the old Bavarian magazine and read those. And then when I saw veiled chameleons, I was like, yeah, well, those are what I want. So I ended up getting a pair and coming up with the funds for a pair back in the day. I think two of them were like $600 or something back in the day. So for 14-year-olds, it was a calamity of it was a calamity of good fortune, I guess. I was able to come into some money by selling some things, but I never told my parents I spent as much as I did, and then because I think my old man would have shot me, and back at that time. And anyways, so I kind of did the reading, raised up two babies, and bred them and hatched some eggs, and it was kind of on from there, I suppose. And then from veiled chameleons, I got some bearded dragons and some frilled lizards, and then and then geckos, and then ackies came on the scene, and I was like, yeah, I got to try ackies. They look really.
So ackies were the first monitor then.
Ackies were the first monitor, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and they were pretty new when I got them. Like, they'd been in the U.S. for maybe a year or two, and some people were breeding them, so I was able to. And then Port Credit Pet Center was able to import some from the U.S., I believe, and I was able to get my hands on some through Grant years and years ago.
Wow, that's
now we date Grant. We now know roughly how old Grant is.
I won't show him.
And at what point, you're known for your Kimberlys too, but maybe now you're more known maybe for your tree monitors because they're a hotter subject, but you became quite known dealing with Kimberleys too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, especially in Canada, but because I think I was the first one in Canada to breed them. Yeah, I don't know. Something with those things just clicked. I don't know if it was just working with some Australian stuff and some heat-loving species before that, but those things just clicked and they bred like wildfire, and I did really well with them. And then they kind of, I mean, I did really well with the ackies too before that, but Kimberleys were kind of like the unicorn, right? At the time, they were like, oh my God, I've only seen pictures of them. They looked amazing. I was able to get a pair, and then again, they did really well for me. So yeah, and then that's pretty much how it became known, like internationally, through exporting pretty much Kimberleys, and some of the other ones I worked with a little bit later after that, you know. But Kimberleys were the hot ticket back in, like, you know, 1999, 2000, you know. So yeah, that's a long time ago.
Couple of years ago. Yeah. You said that, and I was thinking what I was doing then. It wasn't anything productive. I can promise you that.
I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah, but they were definitely like unheard of, especially on the international scene, right? I think they were starting to be bred in the US a little bit, and but in Europe and definitely Asia, nobody had anything. I mean, I think I sent almost every single Kimberley I produced in the first 2 years straight to Japan, one buyer, right? It was crazy. So wow. It's a good time.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that they're still as popular at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think just the look of them for sure. Yeah, people definitely want them. There's a few people breeding them now, so there's, you know, I mean, there's more available in the marketplace for sure. So that's good for Canada, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
the original group you got in, were they captive bred or were they wild caught?
Yeah, they were captive bred. They were from a company called Rare Earth in the U.S. And I ended up getting them secondhand from a guy. A guy actually brought in 2 pairs into Canada, and then he, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure why he was willing to sell 1 pair to me, but I was able to talk him into it, and I got a pair, and he kept a pair, and yeah, like mine started going pretty quickly, so that was good. But yeah, Rare Earth, that was when a guy named Joe Lewis used to own it back in like the 90s, and you know, he had an amazing setup and lots of cool Odatria. And then the company Rare Earth has changed hands a few times in the U.S. since, but the current owner is not who I dealt with back in the day, or who owned it back in the day, let's say.
So I recently, you know, just in preparation for this, I listened to the episode you did with Paul's monitors.
Yeah.
And something I found very interesting was when you guys were talking about the Kimberly, I believe it was Kimberly eggs.
Yeah.
Not hatching because they were too moist.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's like? Do you have an explanation for it, or do you think it's just they just don't handle the high humidity well?
I think it's, well, I mean, the explanation as to why they don't hatch when they're too wet, I think it's just probably internal pressure within the egg. Something's going on in there. I can't really explain it. Maybe the egg tooth falls off prematurely. I'm not really sure. They definitely try to hatch. They just can't. And then they pass away in the egg. So I'm not.
So they are developing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the common story is they go full term in the egg and then can't hatch. So you know, the clutch ends up dying, and people cut out babies, like fully formed, full term babies out of the egg, and they're all dead. Right. So. Right.
So they just basically absorb enough water that they don't dimple and give the.
Well, yeah, I mean, the eggs are just they absorb far too much water.
Yeah.
They're like a hypotonic situation, the egg is. So you know, and people experience egg bursting and stuff too, which is indicative of a highly pressurized egg from too much water, because water is going to migrate into the egg, right? Just through osmosis. It's going to go there if if there's too much water in the environment, because the egg's just filled with solutes, really. So you have to kind of limit that water and make sure you don't have too much that can go into the egg, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they seasonal breeders?
I've always experienced the bulk of breeding with all of my Australian monitors. Usually from January until July, August, and then they sort of do their own little shutdown from that's my dog. They do their own little shutdown from like July, August to December. But the tree monitors, they breed all year round. They're not really? Yeah, well, they don't lay a clutch of eggs every month, or like the Odatria would. So it's almost like they just spread out their resources throughout the year. But whereas Odatria, they just go fast and furious. It's almost like they're programmed to do that in nature. Where they're from, the climate is so, it can be so harsh sometimes of the year, and then so abundant other times where it's like they know this, right? So they try and pump out as many babies in the season that's favorable as possible. Whereas tree monitors, they're more, let's say, equatorial, where, the resources are abundant all year round, let's say, right? They do have a dry season and a rainy season to some degree, but it's never one extreme, you know what I mean?
Yeah, not the same kind of extremes, being island dwellers and all that as well.
Yeah, so but the tree monitors don't lay as many eggs per clutch, right? Like a Kimberly can lay like 13 eggs in a clutch, whereas a tree monitor, you're kind of maxing out at like 5 to 6. I mean, I've had them lay up to 8 eggs in a clutch, but that's rare.
Those are miracle moments.
Yeah.
I wonder if that has something to do with the eggs not being able to handle the moisture as well. Is that they're, if it's only a short period of time where everything with the weather is favorable where they're from, then probably maybe it isn't much rain around that period of time where they're laying or something like that. So the eggs aren't used to moisture at all, or to a certain extent, I guess not.
Yeah, the tree monitors are more tolerant of moisture, it seems. The Australian stuff, those eggs seem to be really sensitive to moisture. So, but yeah, I mean, you can definitely drown a baby tree monitor too. I've done it and I've seen it. So, right. So it's definitely fine. They show all the same signs. The eggs show all the same signs. The fully formed babies show all the same signs that they were overhydrated. So yeah.
Do you find Pilbara eggs are very similar to the Kimberleys?
Kimberleys and Pilbara eggs seem to be the most sensitive to it out of all. They're similar monitors to some degree, anyway. So
locale,
yeah, the same problems occur with Kimberly and Pilbara eggs. Yeah. But I just hatched out a few Pilbaras there a couple days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, it's always good. No pictures?
You know what? I took a video. I just haven't posted it yet. It's just one of those things I've been sitting on my phone and I've been meaning to do it and I keep forgetting. I get sidetracked and I'll post it after this.
Post it after this so we can see it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
What about like with pairings? I guess it differs for every monitor, but in general, are they more of you pair them once and you kind of leave the pair together, or do you pair them just for breeding and then separate?
Well, I keep them paired throughout the breeding season, and I mean, sometimes like especially with Pilbaras, they can be so prolific. Like you're getting a clutch of eggs every 3 to 4 weeks. Where I look at the females and they're like half the size, if not smaller than half the size, like a third the size of a big female Kim. So it's like, man, you're going to burn out. So I'll pull males out if I want to shut them down from breeding. And then in their normal kind of downtime, if I have the enclosure space, I keep males separate. But they tend to shut themselves off a little bit. So, but yeah, if they're like, I had the last kind of generation of Pilbara females that I was breeding. I mean, they were going like crazy. I was getting like I think I had to pull the male after about 7 or 8 clutches from each girl, just because I was like, man, you can't handle this anymore, right? Because they just want to breed, like they just breed.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I find it interesting. You just don't see them as much. Like they're not as, the ackies are quite common. Kimbos, everyone knows them. You might not see them everywhere, but everyone knows them. And then the Pilbaras are kind of this like little secret gem.
Yeah, in the last year, I mean, I've sold a few in Canada, probably like about 10 in Canada, but like the bulk all goes overseas, especially. Yeah. And then they go in waves too, right? It's like now you see, there's probably 3 or 4, 5 people producing some Kimberleys here and there in Canada. And, the reptile hobby in general likes to think that they have something that's rare. So it's like, oh, there's too many of those. I don't want those. And then even the people that feed them, right? Sometimes they're like, oh, they can't sell babies or whatever. So they kind of get out of that project. And then all of a sudden the demand is up for them within a couple of years because they've disappeared, right? Yeah. Like I almost used to, when I would export them to the US, I would alternate years with high productions of Pilbaras. And, because that's what customers internationally wanted. And then when you pumped out a bunch of those and sold them off, then it was like the demand for them dropped, but then you'd have Kimberleys, which seemingly would have disappeared in that time span, in that couple of years. And then everybody wanted Kimberleys, and it was like cyclical, right? If you can keep them going opposites. Yeah. So it was like the crest of the wave was Kimberleys and the trough was Pilbaras, and the next year it'd be like this, and every few years it seems to go up and down like that, right? So that's why I've never gotten out of a project because something's not necessarily selling at that point in time, right? Right. Yeah. And if you enjoy it and you enjoy the species, it's not right. Yeah, I'm not keeping them for the money end of it. I bought them initially because I loved them. They were like, Kimberleys were like the unicorn. And then Pilbaras, once you did Kimberleys, then it was like, oh my God, these things called Pilbara rock monitors are out now. I want to get those, and it was like, it's just natural progression. But yeah. So I think that's the thing with breeding them though. You have to kind of be aware that you're not going to be able to sell them for, especially with breeders that like maybe Canada is their only avenue or something. I've seen this lately with like prices of ackies and stuff, right? Lots of people try and fire sale their stuff if it doesn't sell within 24 hours. I'm just like, and it's they get worried, and I've seen it. I've been there, but yeah, you don't necessarily have to. But it is expensive to feed a bunch of babies if they're not moving too. So I understand why there's that mentality as well, right? Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, they're not the easiest reptiles to house and handle. And so you're not selling them as fast as people are selling crested geckos or ball pythons or any of these things. And like you said, the concept of holding on to babies for a while tends to scare people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even crested geckos. I mean, the last little bit, so many people.
Well, yeah, right now with the way the market is, for sure.
Yeah, the market.
Right. Yeah, right. Like crested geckos, ball pythons. I mean, they're not super expensive to keep, and like crested geckos. I mean, heck, you feed them a premix kind of pudding, really, right? They require any heat. I mean, the animals themselves are not the most expensive if you're just going for a pet crested gecko, right? So there's a lot of bonuses to having a pet like that. But even now, like then everybody that has purchased them, has wanted to breed them, and is breeding them. There's a bit of market saturation in there, but like definitely the monitors. I mean, there's a bit more to keeping them in terms of cost input, right? You have to get the enclosure, and you have to heat the enclosures and all that. So, and then the sticker price for the individual baseline animal is much more expensive than your baseline crested gecko, let's say. So there's a bit of a sure,
for sure.
One thing that I find kind of back into the ackie realm, like I have people who kind of question me that the difference between a yellow and a red. They think it's just kind of color, but there's more to it than that. Even though they've kind of combined the species, like do you feel that?
I actually have no idea what the difference is. So maybe you could
sort
of you could start to give it. Yeah.
Oh well.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Because no one wants to hear what I said.
I mean, this is a chronic battle that has been fought for 30 years on ackies, right? Like the difference between reds and yellows and what it is. I mean, they used to be considered two different species. You know, Acanthurus brachyurus was the yellow ackie, and then Acanthurus acantharus was the red ackie. And then they've been reclassified all as the same species now, but they're different locales, right? So people have got in the habit of just considering it a color difference, which there is a definite color difference. I mean, if you see a nice true locale, let's say red ackie versus a yellow ackie, it's like night and day to me. I don't know how people get confused with that, but like the yellow ackies, they'll have ocelli, but you know, they're kind of circular on the back with nothing too much to them. But the red ackies will have the ocelli with a nice black spot. Red ackies have like beautiful dark heads on males, females a little less, and their tails are dark. Their arms are yellow underneath. Egg size is different between them. Red ackie eggs are bigger. Red ackies they'll have smaller clutches but bigger eggs. Red ackies are personality-wise quite a bit different than yellows too, right? They're much more aggressive, and you know, in terms of handling, yellows are much better. Reds, you know, 50% of them will try and swing around and bite you, kind of thing. That's what I find. Mind you, I don't handle mine much, but yeah. So there's, I mean, I've done it before. Where I've done side by sides with reds and yellows, and you know, the problem with it is now people just the waters have been muddied so much with like crossing the localities, which if they're all the same species, you know, people have less fear of doing that. I've tended to keep the localities true. Like I've never taken a yellow and crossed it with a red, just because, you know, it just creates confusion. I mean, but there's a lot of yellows that are nice and orange, right? There's like the Mount Isa yellows, which are really orange. Yeah. That was the line that I was working with, and you know, they change hands a few times, and then some guys selling them online as red ackies, and it's like, no, you know, that's not a red ackie. But it was, then their argument is, well, it was sold to me as a red ackie, and I mean, I get it. It's hard for people to tell if they've never seen a real red ackie. So yeah, I mean, I've even had some pretty big monitor breeders mess it up too. So right, so it's not easy, but there are definitely some. There are, I mean, for me to look at a male red and a male yellow, or a female red and a female yellow, it's like night and day. But yeah, but I've, you know, again, I worked with them for 25 years, right? So
are they available? You mentioned, I think you just mentioned you had some, but are they available in general in the hobby? Because I feel like at expos or in general, it's always the yellows we see, right?
Yeah, I know. Reds are, I don't know, man. They're like, you think ackie, they should breed like wildfire. The reds, they're not as easy to produce as the yellows. Right. The reds are in much more demand. In fact, I can't even tell you how many reds I've sold in the last couple of years in Canada. Maybe a handful, really. So there's none here. There's really none. There's a few people that have some that they got from me, but other than that, like, yeah.
Every once in a while, I see one, but I don't see it often.
Yeah, and then even some of the ones that are coming in from Europe as reds, they're not really reds, like, you know what I mean? So, yeah. But at the end of the day, they're just selling them as colorful ackies now. So it's up to you, kind of what you want to go for, I suppose.
Do the locales ever cross in the wild? Or is there any proof of it, I guess?
Well, I'm sure the differentiation between locales and the wild isn't as cut and dry as you know, we pretend they are in captivity. So sure. I'm sure there is, like, you know,
the oranges you were talking about.
Yeah, like
isn't that what yellow and red makes?
Yeah, their ranges are huge. So the ones that we have in, you know, in the US and Canada and Europe, I mean, they're from, you know, maybe the extremes of the range or something. But when you get, you know, there's many variations of ackie out there. I mean, there's there's subspecies of ackie. I don't even know if they're still considered subspecies or if they've been grouped all in the same species, but that are different than yellows and reds, right? Like Varanus. I'm going to butcher this. I think it's like Barichi or something. It's like an ackie as well. But it's like more of a yellow than I'd say a typical red. But yeah, so there's a few different categories or localities of ackie. But I mean, I guess where you collect them throughout their range is quite vast. So I mean, you'll see differences in anything, just like you would here too, right? So it all depends on what initial animals came in from wherever and what that sample population that was brought in looked like, you know. That's basically where we're getting our lines from, you know. But in the wild, there's totally variable, you know. And I
remember years ago that like hearing, oh, yellows are from more of the edge of the forest, so they climb more than the reds. I remember all of these things, and then like all of that kind of disappeared when they categorize them as the same thing.
I mean, sure. You know what, ackies, all of them will use the highest perch possible. Given the coloration of a red ackie, you think more of the red sands of Australia, kind of towards the interior, right? So, you know, I think there's probably a bit of truth to that, you know. Yellow ackies are probably more from the, you know, subtropical regions. I mean, they live an arid existence probably as well, but red ackies are like the true arid versions of the ackie for sure.
Yeah.
And then I also hear that the term like red phase, yellow phase, red, I don't know what, is that just like color mutations or color morphs that like people are playing with now?
I think people are just using that, right? Like now if I advertise reds versus yellows, like, I mean, I used to just say they're two different species when they were categorized as two different species. But now I would say like red locality ackies or traditional red ackies versus traditional yellow ackies. Yeah. All semantics.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about behavior? So you were the breeder of the famous Sabzi and Basil.
Yeah.
Is
that's what you're most known for.
That's what you're is their behavior, and you know how Diane opens the cage and they jump on him and all that. Is that something that's normal to them, or is that something that, you know, it takes a lot of work to kind of get to? Like I don't know how to like properly phrase it, but like are they really that easy to become that handleable, or did Diane just put a lot of work into it?
No, you know what? I mean, to be quite honest, I don't socialize any of them, right? I don't handle them. I let them be in their enclosures, but just in time, they'll naturally be curious and inquisitive and come out to you. I mean, I've had black tree monitors that I never intentionally like play with and do anything. I mean, geez, if I like have the enclosure open and I kind of look down or whatever, I mean, they run and they'll jump on my head sometimes, right? And those are like wild caught animals. Same with the greens. I haven't done anything special. I think Diane's expedited that though by like he actually, like, his goal was to interact with them, so he's really sped that process up. You know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they just naturally, you know, they'll naturally. But I mean, some of these animals I've been working with for like the greens for 6, 7, 8 years. You know, blues 12 years, right? So, some of the pairs that I have, so it just comes with time. I haven't done anything special to get them to socialize, and not all of mine are like that, but a high percentage will, you know, jump out on me or, you know, grab something out of my fingers and run away or whatever, right? So
they're very curious. Like, my black is way more, like, I felt like some of my other monitors were curious, inquisitive animals, but the tree monitors are, it's really interesting. I'm pretty blown away at how inquisitive they are and how much they investigate everything.
Well, you know what? I think that's, I mean, they're really intelligent.
Yeah.
And I think, like, Diane Dion with Sabzi, he eliminated the fear element right away, right? And these were captive bred, so they've known nothing different. But they're really intelligent. I'm sure they, you know, if you had wild caught animals, like I started, all the ones that I have, for the most part, with the exception of the holdback ones, they're all wild caught animals. I never had access to captive bred ones. So, you know, they may remember some traumatic situation with people when they were collected or whatever. So it might take a while for them to kind of overcome that. Like for me, yeah. So once they get over that fear and they don't see you as a threat at all, then it's game over. They're, you know, once they see you as friend and not foe, then they'll be able to do anything with you. Yeah. So yeah.
Is this something you find? Are all monitors that social and that smart, or are tree monitors maybe like a little bit smarter than the rest, do you find?
Yeah, I think Indonesian monitors in general are more intelligent than, let's say, the Odatria, at least, right? I can't speak for, well, I can kind of speak for some of the bigger Australian ones, like Spencer's monitors. I've had those. I've had Mertens. I didn't really see the intelligence in those that I see in the tree monitors. So, yeah, tree monitors are at a different level for sure for intelligence, right? They're not so instinctual. I mean, they actually problem solve and think. And
and in a way that we can recognize as problem solving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they all problem solve. We just don't recognize it, I'm sure.
I've been reading some stuff a little bit lately, and one thing that came up was a group in a zoo actually did some studies, and they figured out that a blackthroat they have could actually count to 6.
Yeah,
not in English. It was in
Spanish.
It was only in Spanish. Yeah. But and I thought that was interesting. You know, it was in reference. Like I didn't figure out the whole study. I didn't have a chance to read the paper itself, but.
Yeah, a lot of those things, right? It's like it's classical conditioning.
Yeah.
Right? Pavlov's dog, so to speak. So whether it's like true learning or like just, I guess,
repetition, copying.
Right. You know, it's like, oh, they learn to hit the white ball for food, right? I mean, I don't know how representative that is of intelligence, but I mean, they can definitely problem solve. They definitely remember, like, you know, if we've discussed escapees, Greg, and it's like, if they figured out of an enclosure, and you're like, oh my gosh, and then you put it back in that enclosure, within minutes they'll remember how they got out and do it again.
Yeah.
Right? So
mine was over there trying to pull the plug I put. And as soon as I turned my back, while I was watching him, he wasn't doing anything. I turned my back and he went over and I could hear him.
Is this the old Kimberly?
This is the black.
The black.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. Monitors are escape artists. All of them are escape artists, right? I remember my first trio of ackies. I got this beautiful trio of ackies, and I thought, well, again, first dabbling with monitors, I was like, oh, this is the perfect cage and enclosure, and you know, everything's set up, and like within a day, I go back down there to kind of check them out and look at them. I can't find one of them in the enclosure. I'm like, oh my God, they all escaped. Every single one escaped. And I was like, no, what happened? Like, where are they? Ripped apart the whole reptile. I mean, this is when I was like still in university, right? I was living in my dad's basement that summer. And I had like reptiles in one section. I was like, I could not find them. You know where I found the damn things? They had all climbed into a vacuum cleaner hose and got into the body of the vacuum. Yeah.
Wow.
Was the vacuum used before you found them?
That's where I found them, inside the vacuum cleaner. They had all I hadn't turned it on and sucked them up. They had all like wandered around the room, and there was a shop vac in the corner, and they had found the entrance to the hose, and they all went in the entrance to the hose, and they were all in the shop vac. Yeah.
Wow.
How long did it take you to find them?
I probably a few hours by the time I was like, there's nowhere. I like looked everywhere, you know, like pulling up pieces of carpet and like you name it. And then
they weren't dried up hard ackies at that.
No. They were good. They were the ones that ended up, you know, producing all the ackies that you know, eventually went on to sell and stuff. But yeah, they're, you know, so then
my first ackie, he got out, and within like the second day he got out. Steven, yeah. And he was, and I actually found him the next day. I couldn't find him anywhere, and I had a pair of pants folded up.
I do remember.
And sitting on a thing. And the next day, I came down and I was like, "Oh, these are the ones I want." And I lifted it up and I shook them to flap them open, and and he went shooting out of them. I was like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah. I mean, it's man, like if you like, heaven forbid, like a baby Kimberly or something get out, because I mean, adult monitor is one thing, but like a tiny little Kimberly, forget it. Like you'll never find that thing, and if you do, you're extremely lucky. But the problem with escapees like that is if it's a cold basement or something, you know, they'll be heated up when they left their enclosure, and they'll go find a hiding spot somewhere, and then they'll slowly cool down, and their metabolism gets so low they just kind of fall asleep, and eventually they die there, right? They don't have the jam to get out of where they were. So like that's the problem. I had a black tree monitor get out in my new shop, and I was like, I had no idea where it was. You check all the typical spots, right? You know, up against heat tape. Well, the thing had crawled on top of the enclosures, and it must have jumped to, I have these big heat and air conditioning runs that go across the length of the shop, and there's holes cut out in the side of it to distribute the air. The thing had crawled in one of those holes and was laying in the bottom of the run. And because it was summer, the air conditioning was going, and it got cold in there, and it was just lying there. It wouldn't move. Like it was just too cool for it because the air conditioning was blowing over it. It wouldn't move. And luckily I shone the flashlight in there as a last resort and saw it, because it definitely would have died there. It just, there's no life left, and it was so cold. Right. So I found that thing, and it was fine. But you know, it happens, right? You have, you know, I've had employees in the past that, you know, they leave the cage door open a little bit or something, right? Just stuff like that will happen from time to time, unfortunately. But yeah, so I mean, I've had baby Kimberleys get out in the shop, and I pretty much just write those things off. Like I think to myself, I'm never gonna find a baby Kimberly, and you know where they turn up? Take a guess where the baby Kimberleys will turn up.
The vacuum.
Vacuum.
I'm not sure.
I would imagine the wedge right in between two little thin, like in between two enclosures would be my first guess.
Yeah, I found them in like spots like that, right? Because I've had a few escapees over the years, but I would say 75% of them turn up in the cricket bin.
They just went hunting.
Yeah, so I always like. There's a couple things I do for escapees. One is my cricket bin. I'll always push it up against the back of an enclosure, because I have some curtains and stuff, so they like to climb, and then they'll see the crickets in there, and they'll launch in there to try and get one. And then they're stuck in the bin, right? So that's one. And then, you know, every once in a while, if there's an escapee, like, you know, you keep the floors nice and clean, and then you see a pile of poop or something in a corner. It's like, okay, you're kind of hanging out in this area. Then I'll just get pieces of bark, and I'll stick it in I'll layer it up and just stick it in the corner. And then I'm not too concerned. Like, there's enough crickets running around in the shop, and
the shop's warm, you know?
Yeah, and the shop's warm. So I'm like, yeah, I'll find you eventually. And I always find them in the bark too. They'll go in there for security. It's, oh, this is what I like. And then you just pick the bark, you just peel the bark away, and oh, there they are. Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's a good idea. I've tried to do things like that when I've had like geckos get out and stuff like that in the past, and you leave food out or you leave whatever, and they never appear. Like
I sit in the dark, in the room in the dark with a flashlight, and every like 10 minutes I'll like flash, and then eventually you see something run across, and it usually works pretty well.
Yeah. In the shop, I used to have a couple fat-tailed geckos that I would just let out in the shop so they could eat the crickets and stuff. And then, but I always knew where they would hide. They always like to hide under one of the rack systems, and they'd be in there and they'd come out at night and eat crickets on the floor and stuff. But then I remember my first like escapee in the shop, my first baby monitor escapee, and I'm thinking to myself, fat-tailed gecko would eat that baby Kimberly in a second. I better not do this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, so how big? So this is super interesting. So when I first saw the Kimberleys you got,
yep,
I was shocked at how small they are.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're saying a fat tail could eat them as well, like a fat-tailed gecko. How small are they coming out?
Well, not too much smaller than that, though. I can't remember how old.
Well, like snout to vent for a baby Kimberly, or like 1.5 inches maybe.
Oh wow!
And then you got like 2 inches of tail on that. Like they're pretty small.
Is there anything that you do at those in those like first couple of weeks to kind of like help establish them, or is there a different change in diet or an increase in temperature that you do during the first couple of weeks, or is it same care as adults right out of the egg?
Yeah, I pretty much, pretty much similar setups to how the adults have it. Just smaller crickets, but even a baby Kimberly, like I still feed them 1/2-inch crickets. They like big food. If you try and feed them like pinhead crickets or portage crickets, they're not interested. You try and separate them out as much as possible, like keep the babies individually. They don't do the exceptionally well if there's multiple in a enclosure, and if space permits. But one of the other things I'll do for baby Kimberly is every once in a while I'll just put like some chopped scrambled egg on the basking rock, or some chopped pinkies. They seem to like that, but I always put it on the basking rock, so when they come out and bask, it's right there, and then they eat it all. Right? They don't seem to like. Oftentimes, if it's in a dish off to the side, they might not find it or whatever. So makes for a bit of a. You have to clean a little more regularly.
Yeah, it's a little messy.
They're not the cleanest eaters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
my Kimberly's just spread quail eggs all over the place.
Oh yeah,
and I'm like, they're big, man. Like I thought they'd just take them right down super easy when I gave them some.
Speaking of, there's like 5 or 6 quail eggs
for
you to take for a moment.
And it's I was blown away. I was like, oh my, everything else like eats, even my ackies eat them better than my Kimberly's do.
Yeah, I mean, they're just messy. I mean,
yeah, it was incredible how messy.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, if you feed a tree monitor whole prey like a baby quail or a fuzzy mouse or something, I mean, they'll pull it up on the side of the enclosure, they'll bash it all over, they'll claw it, or their guts are hanging out, and they'll fling it. I mean,
yeah,
that's one like testament for having I don't like using the word bioactive, but microorganisms and smaller invertebrates running around in your enclosure, because they'll like at night they'll climb the walls and get me blood and guts and yolk that's like strewn on the walls, all up for you, right?
Yeah. They'll help.
So do you do, or like, I don't like using the word bioactive either, but do you do any sort of bioactivity for the more arid species? Is there any sort of bug that you'll throw in with the dry? Because I assume isopods probably won't survive in those climates.
No, the isopods do survive actually, because they're arid, but there's always micro areas where it's
microclimates.
Yeah. So like even the tree monitors I spray every day with water, so the majority of the enclosure dries up, but there's still the underlayer of mulch that's a bit moist, or under some bark or whatever. They find a place to hide, those things, and then I think they're like dermestid beetles or something that come in with the crickets too.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't intentionally thrown those in, but they just find their way in anyways, right? Because they fly and you can't stop them, and they're actually good, right? They're like they don't bug the tree monitors, and then any feces that hit the ground, they writhe up and maul it. It's gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of anyone having much success with. When I used to work at the store, at a pet store, everyone would come in and always ask, "How can I do for my bearded dragon? How can I go bioactive?" And most people would say that their isopods survived. I think now people are trying things like silverfish and hexapods for it. But yeah, I guess with the tree monitors, like I assume.
Yeah, that's humid enough to be okay. It's
Yeah.
more like the Kimberleys and ackies that are a little tougher. Like I don't even have. I like to throw in superworms, kind of more for hunting enrichment than any nutritional content. Yeah. I never get beetles. I'm sure. So like maybe all of them are getting caught, but
you know what? I'm actually afraid of superworms in my enclosures because I mean I've had it where superworms have actually like if they pupate and turn into a beetle, then the beetles will breed and they'll like lay their eggs in the wood or the nest box, and then you get these little superworms in the nest box. And I've actually had superworms eat holes in eggs.
Oh wow!
In the nest box.
Yeah,
I can see that. Yeah, I've heard the horror stories of them getting into your phone background, and then all you ever
phone background. I heard phone background.
Phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking?
As soon as you put it on the wallpaper of your phone, you just get addicted and you can't stop looking.
Yeah.
No, but they get in behind your coating, and all you can hear is forever.
Well, you know what? It's funny because like superworms, you know, they're a big worm and they have some power behind those jaws. So they can actually do some damage to eggs and stuff, whereas most other things can't penetrate the eggshell. But like I've had it where, you know, I've fed I feed some roaches to everything as well, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you go in to clean the enclosure and you pull the bark all out, and these, you know, small roaches that you threw in are now a ton of adults behind the cork.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's like a roach breeding colony in there, right? And they get to a point and they're like numerous enough where the tree monitors, like they get big enough, the tree monitors don't even want to look at them, right?
Yeah.
But, like, I had that with, I had it more so with like kahua geckos and stuff, right? Where you feed them the little roaches and then, you know, you feed them little roaches and they like them and they eat them. But any roach that they don't eat buries in the coconut husk and stuff. And then the roach will come out and feed on the rapashi, right? And grow. Rapashi is a great roach food if you're curious. And then you go in there months later and like you decide to go and clean up all the substrate and pull the bark out and clean that. And then you pull the bark off the wall and you look behind, there's like 18 massive roaches in there. Like, holy smokes, you know, how the heck did this kahua gecko? Like,
you started calling me.
It's like, man, you look at like this kahua gecko can't even use its own hiding space because there's big roaches in there. So,
I typically I tongue feed roaches or I put them in a cup.
Yeah. Ceramic dishes.
Yeah, that they can't get out of. But even that one I don't really like because, you know, once they're a certain size, there's a chance they can always get out. I don't want to deal with them.
I don't feed the adults. I don't have anything big enough to feed the adults.
I've never seen a monitor. I've put roaches in dishes too, and I've sat there and watched the monitor come down and eat the roaches, and it'll stand right in the middle of the dish, and it'll pick one roach, and then 3 roaches will crawl out on the monitor. And
my savannah is notorious for that, and I have a tray that I'll feed her certain things in if so she knows if I tap on the tray, it's time for some food.
Yeah.
And if I toss a few roaches in there, she always goes for one, and other ones just run up her.
Yeah.
I have to watch the whole time because my wife would.
Yeah.
Pretty much kill me while I slept if they.
It's losing battle to cup feed roaches and expect that you won't have any in the cage. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like it is literally a scientific impossibility in my experience, right? But the good thing about the monitors is that they always find them later. Like, I mean, they'll always locate them. So if they do get out, they will find them. I mean, I see them looking in cork notches and grooves and fishing things out all the time. Like they you know, when. And you know that's an argument for not feeding them every day also, right? Like I only feed every second day. So on their days off, they do get a bit hungry and they start looking around.
Yeah, they start finding all the missing stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Two excellent questions from that one comment. You mentioned they're looking through rocks and they're digging their hands and doing all this. So in your opinion, how important is enrichment and enrichment toys and that kind of things for mod. Like, do you think that if you guys aren't giving them that, they are missing something?
Oh, they're not demonstrating their full behavioral spectrum that they'd show in the wild for sure, right? So they like, I mean, it gives them something to do. This is one of the reasons I don't really like the idea of cup feeding. I don't like the idea. First of all, mine don't really like to dip their head in a deli cup and pick crickets out. So I just throw crickets in there, right? I don't throw a ton of crickets in there because I want them to make sure, I like to keep them hungry anyways, but I want to make sure that they get them all. And so I don't throw a ton in there. But yeah, the fact that they have to go around and chase prey and search for it and find it, and some of that prey will escape at the time of feeding and they'll find it 3 hours later or the next day, right?
Yeah.
Sure, that cricket's not gut loaded, but they got the bulk of the gut load when they fed, you know. So yeah, I mean, it gives them something to do for sure in an enclosure. I mean, because the reality is, I mean, we're putting them in enclosures. There isn't an enclosure that you could make that would be big enough to simulate Indonesia, right? Like where they're so.
Absolutely.
So the argument, that argument of enclosure size is kind of, you know, a bit irrelevant for me. I mean, they're confined, regardless of what you have it in. They're confined. So if you can give them some enrichment that way, it definitely occupies them. I mean, that's what they do in the wild. They'd spend all day looking for stuff, anyways, right? So yeah, it's important. And then people do lots of variations of foraging behavior, right? From putting things in grass balls like Dion does, and, you know, hiding things. Greg gave me the feed dispenser that has the buttons and the holes in it. So, you know, the monitor can smell what's inside and then it explores it and eventually like realizes and will learn over time that it can hit the button and drop the food out, right? So just stuff like that, right? I mean, hell, I even let my, you know, I just got a dog last week and,
congratulations.
Well, thanks. It
doesn't look like it was your decision.
Well, yeah, not that I'm not I mean, I like dogs, but it's just for my lifestyle, I'm busy enough. I didn't need a dog, but there's lots of family pull to get a dog, so I agreed. But like, you know, I let that thing come into the shop in the last 2 times I've been in there feeding. And the monitors are even interested in that. Like, oh, what's that? They'll come up to the glass and they'll be looking down at the dog running around. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It's a little retriever. So they're not even afraid of it. I think that, you know, they're just curious. They come and look at just some different stuff all the time. People throw leaves in. Like I go to my cottage and I collect maple leaves that fall off the trees in the fall and put them in garbage bags. And then, you know, every once in a while, I'll throw a bunch of those in there. Just new smells, things for them to explore. Right, stuff like that. Right, the bark I have, like I have cork panels on the inside of my enclosures, but the bark that I use is straight out of the forest from dead trees and whatever. You know, rinse it off, throw new branches and bark in there every once in a while, and the whole new smells and, you know, whatever invertebrates are in there, whatever. You know, they explore it. They're curious for sure.
Yeah. And are they a site? I don't know how to phrase it. Are they a site driven species, or are they very scent heavy? Like, how do they? What's their main sensor that they use? I guess I forgot all my words right now. You know what I mean?
Well, they're
like, is their eyesight very good?
Are they sight hunters, or are they
their ears?
Yeah, their eyesight is, you know, is bird-like. Let's put it that way. I mean, they look
like birds, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're you know, their first response is to see something, I'm sure, right? Like, I mean, even if I try my best to spy on something, even like peeking around the enclosure just a little bit, I mean, they cue in on every single movement. I mean, their visual acuity is second to none. I mean, it makes sense. They evolved to eat bugs, so you know, they have to be visually acute to movement and shapes and things like that, just like a bird, right? Anything that eats insects is going to have, for the most part, great eyesight if it's diurnal, because that's the evolutionary struggle, right? Bugs get good camouflage and they adapt behaviors that help them blend in, and the predators have to overcome that with their evolutionary strategies of eyesight and, you know, visual acuity and noticement of movement and things like that. So, and then obviously, if they can't see something, then their sense of smell and taste, right, with their tongue is very well tuned as well, right? So if they can't see, but they know it's there in a hole or something, they'll explore it, right?
Yeah. Super interesting. I wonder if, like, at one point we'll get to the point of just leaving our TV on for reptiles, like people do for their dogs and cats. Like, here's enrichment, watch some TV, and it's just bugs running across the screen.
Well, that might drive them nuts, to be honest.
Yeah. It'll just be constantly, well, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, most of their, like, most of their behavior is, it's all sight driven. I mean, in their social interactions, a lot of it's, well, most of it's sight driven too. I mean, let's just say with the monitors, I don't have any enclosure facing another one where two monitors from different enclosures can see each other.
Right.
Because they will constantly react to each other and stress out.
Yeah, well, I mean, some breeders don't think so. I know lots of guys. Well, I know a couple guys that are successful with their tree monitor enclosures facing each other, and they're still breeding them. But it's just like in the past, with what I've noticed, I've seen enough things that are just visual based things that I'm just like, I'm not going to bother. I'll just eliminate that possibility, and I face all the enclosures the same direction in my shop, just so they can't see each other, right? Yeah. I've seen it a million times. Oh, why, my green tree monitors won't breed, they're always hiding, blah blah blah. And then somebody has a lace monitor across the room from the green tree enclosure and they're facing each other, right? It's like that sort of stuff. Or the bearded dragon in the tank that's sitting there constantly at the glass bobbing its head, right? I mean, that's intimidating, if it's a less dominant lizard. So there's they're really visually acute that way.
I've seen similar things with two different species of mountain hammer dragons seeing each other through the glass and both start bobbing their head to the point where I've shifted things around I don't have barriers between everything, but I try to avoid it as well. I definitely think it's a big thing, them seeing each other through enclosures.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about one of the biggest things that I hear, one of the biggest debates I hear with monitors, and it always for some reason goes back to savannah monitors, is how incorrectly people are feeding them and how most of them are overweight and that their diets in captivity are all wrong. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you have to imagine that a savannah monitor in the wild, it's going to be opportunistic, first of all. So anything that it finds it will eat. But most of what it finds are going to be invertebrates, right? So they're not, I mean, how likely is it that a savannah monitor is going to be catching rodents?
Yeah.
Not at all, right? Not at all. So maybe the odd time it might be able to go into a burrow of something, a young savannah, and find a nest of mice or something. But that would be extremely rare. Most of them, they're cruising, they're cruising the savannas, finding invertebrate spiders, centipedes, snails, scorpions, all of that stuff. That's what they're eating, right? I mean, you can tell by how quickly they gain weight if you feed them rodents that it's not a proper diet for it.
Well, I saw how quickly... No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the problem with savannah monitors, like the bigger monitors, right? They're almost, I mean, we know better now, but historically they're all fat because people feed them mice and birds, right? Like quails and stuff. And quails are a bit better in terms of fat content, but none of that stuff is eaten in the wild by any of the big monitors, I don't think. Very rarely, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like all of the Indonesian big monitors, I mean, most of them probably eat crustaceans in the mangroves and bigger invertebrate, maybe the odd bird nest and stuff like that. But
But even black throats and white throats are the same. They're really a insect eater, invertebrate eater. So maybe not insect, but invertebrate. And but everyone feeds them their chicken and their because it's dramatic. And our insects in this part of the world are not nearly as big as they are in Africa.
No, yeah.
So it becomes a lot of content. A lot of bugs go in.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem with the bigger monitors is, is the diet, because there's nothing on the market that we can, I mean, there's a few things that we can feed them that would mimic what they naturally eat, right?
Yeah.
It's like we see the same problem with humans, right? It's like you take, an indigenous, Canadian, like an Inuit person, and they're used to eating high protein meals where they are, right? Because they're hunter and gatherer still for the most part, right? And you submerge them in a Western diet. Well, what do they get? They all get diabetes, and they have a high potential for putting on fat, and more so than somebody who was raised on a traditional European diet, right? So it's all about where they're from and what they traditionally ate. And so it's people, I think people know better now. It's just that the availability of feeder insects is not that great. Now with the, with the legality of like disco roaches now, I mean, them being legal, that's good, because you got a big colony of discos and you could feed a savannah, I mean, it's, it doesn't.
No, and I can't.
Do they get big enough?
Oh yeah, she loves them. Yeah, they get big enough in there. But I still have to. She'll still go through a fair few of them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But that's the commitment to the big.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
But I mean, you can still feed them a mouse or two once in a while. It's great.
Oh yeah, and she loves the quail eggs.
Yeah,
and they're button quail, so the egg itself is probably about 3/4 of an inch to 7/8 of an inch.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they'll do nest raiders in the wild too if they find just like a Gila.
Oh yeah.
If they find a bird that they're eating it all, right? Like So like even with the tree monitors, I'll feed them, only females that are reproducing or animals that I'm growing up. Like once a week, I'll feed them a couple fuzzy mice. There's a place for it, but nobody know. Like I don't know what a tree monitor would eat in the wild. Like mostly bugs, I'm sure.
As an occasionally,
maybe the odd bird, right? But again,
that would be pretty lucky.
One of the things I find interesting is that all of the tree monitors I've ever had, wild caught ones, captive bred ones, they actually respond to rodents right away. Like there is no hesitation on that food. They love it. And part of me thinks, well, maybe there is like a percentage of their tree monitor's diet in the wild that is partially rodent.
Yeah.
There's a seasonal boom of like a tree rat or something.
Yeah, because there are lots of different sized rodents too, like around the world. We just have as feeders mice and rats. That's what we kind of visualize, which are potentially much fatter, especially when they're farm raised for food.
I also wonder if it's a smell thing. Like they just smell stronger at a younger age the rats smell stronger than inverts, or I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, I do feed some rodents. It seems to, not often, but like once a week, I'll feed females that are breeding a couple fuzzies. They love it. It hasn't seemed to be detrimental at all. I mean, I have a female tree monitor that's probably, my oldest one's probably 15 years old by now, 16 years old. She's still breeding. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. Do we know their lifespan?
Not really. Oh. Well, because
Brandon will tell us down the road.
I was gonna say that. I assume most of what we have as adults is wild caught. So
right, I have no idea. Yeah. I only know that my oldest one was a wild caught animal, but I got it at a store, and the store that got it in was in Pickering, and they got one from whoever. I'm not even sure where they got it from, but it was a young one when it came in, and they had it in the store for like 3 years before I bought it. I didn't even know they had it, or else I would have picked it up a lot sooner. Somebody tipped me off at a reptile show that they had it. So I went in there because, I'm not in the habit of going in a PJ's Pet Center anymore. Yeah. So they had it. I ended up.
It was a PJ's.
Yeah, I know. Right. So they said they had it for 3 years, and they got it as a juvenile, little one. So, so that was three years at the store, and then I've had it for like I don't know, 12, 13 years now. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
we're looking at least around 20 plus.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, thing's still breeding and it's 15, 16 years old. So, and regularly breeding, not sporadic.
Yeah.
So the potential's huge, right? Like I think they're, with moderate reproduction, and a decent diet, they probably live 20 years plus.
Wow.
So, but this thing's bred like a champ for me for 12 years.
And this is a green tree, sorry?
This is a blue.
Blue. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And she's, I've given her a cycle off, let's say, in the past, because she'd lay a clutch that contained like 3 eggs instead of her usual 5. So I'm like, oh, okay, maybe she's slowing down. Maybe she's at that point. So I was like, I'll give her a break. I didn't breed her the next cycle. And then, so 5 months after she laid eggs, I put the male back in, and then she'd breed, but then she'd lay a clutch of 6 eggs. I was like, oh, okay. So she's, so it's like, I don't know, she's going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, what species are you currently working with for the trees?
Of the trees?
Yeah.
Macraei, the blue trees, Rhizingeri, the yellow trees, Beccari, the black trees, Prasinus, the green trees, and Cordensis, the Biak tree monitor.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Have you had any luck with them yet, or?
Yeah, I got a clutch of eggs from the Biak. So I have eggs from every single species of tree monitor that I own right now in the incubator. So yeah, I'll have
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
About 5 months time, I'll have a pretty wicked photo shoot coming out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Are there others that like?
I want to be in the background of that photo shoot.
Yeah, like our fishing pic.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll have all the cool stuff, and I'll just be like,
I should pull up that picture.
There's me with the little fish. Yeah. But
is there other types that maybe you don't have, or are those all the ones in captivity, or all the ones I guess that are available?
Well, I guess you say there's the big 6, right? Which 5 of them are the ones I just mentioned, and the one that I'm still waiting to get is Varanus bomiae. And
are those purple or?
No, they're black. They're like a Beccari, but they're called the golden spot monitor.
Yeah, they've got patterning on them.
Yeah, they almost look a bit like in the face like a crocodile monitor. Like, I mean, the snout's not like a crocodile monitor, but the pattern, they have the yellow blushing on their lips, and then they got gold speckling all over them. I've seen some of them, like my buddy in the US there, Brian from Sundown Reptiles. He has one that's almost like it's black, but it's got these like yellow bands on it. They almost look like tiger stripes. That thing looks really cool. So they're variable for sure.
Is that? Oh, are you showing me? Okay, yeah,
that's one there.
Yeah. Are there both care wise and like attitude, personality wise? Are there many differences between all the colors, or is it mostly just like a color thing?
It's just color. Their behaviors are very similar. The only thing that is like a little bit different might be Beccari, the black trees. But honestly, they might just like it a bit cooler than the rest of the species. So I haven't quite figured. I haven't quite figured that end of it out yet. But I've tried keeping it a bit cooler. I might take a pair and put them like really cool and see if that changes production at all. But the pairs that are breeding for me now they're breeding regularly, just as regular as the other ones. They just give me a fewer eggs now. But there's been things in the past, like the clutches are smaller, just in general. It seems like Beccari will lay you like 3 to 4 eggs, whereas Macraei will lay you 5, Rhizingeri 5, Prasinus like 5 to 8. Cordensis, they seem to be a small species. I only got 3 eggs from that clutch, so but that could just be I had a small female. I had a hard time tracking down that species, like piecing them together. So you don't really know how big they are relative to the other species. Some people say they're the same. All of the Cordensis that I have seem smaller than the rest of the colors that I have, but yeah, Beccari there seems to be a couple quirks about them that tell me that they probably like it a bit cooler. So Yeah.
What do you do? How do you keep yours temp-wise? Generally,
Like,
you're like a 75 degree with a hot spot of 90 or
yeah, like 80-degree ambient in my shop with a hot spot of like maybe 100.
okay,
You know, not as hot as you'd keep the Odatria,
right?
like in terms of a hot spot and stuff.
Yeah,
They, I mean, you can tell they'll, but even then they'll come out and they'll intermittently bask. They'll bask and then do their thing, and sometimes they'll hang out on the wall on the far side. But then after an hour, you know, of doing that, then they'll come and bask for a few minutes again, and yeah, so
they're not as I don't want to use the word lazy, but they're not as lazy as many of the other monitor species that I've dealt with. Like they don't like. I find so far I haven't had, you know, my Bakari very long, but he definitely doesn't lounge and bask.
I've seen him jump off.
Like my ackies or savannah or my Kimberlys, like they're like, ooh, I got a hot spot, yeah, and he's definitely investigating. He's hustling around more. He gets a little bit of heat, and then he
newest inhabitant.
He's the newest inhabitant,
so he may still be just in that my enclosure process.
That could be. Yeah, they are. They do seem a bit more active for sure. Like they're always around. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you get ackies, they get complacent. Their blobs under their rocks and stuff.
Yeah. That's why I always throw leaves in. As long as I toss a bunch of dried leaves in periodically, that seems to stimulate my ackies like mad.
I have cameras in my shop, and all the cameras are facing just the tree monitor enclosures because those are like my focus right now. Like the other ones just been there and done that with them, so I just leave them. But I'm always watching the tree monitors on the cameras and stuff. Right, they're always kind of moving around for sure.
Yeah,
I need to get some cameras down here. That definitely needs to happen. Yeah. Let me ask you about substrate, because this is I and more specifically substrate for like arid species. So like the Kimberlys and the ackies and whatever else. What do you keep them on, and how thick of a like not exact measurements, but how thick are you going with substrate level? And are they using it? Do they actually burrow? Do you witness these kind of things?
Oh yeah, well, this is going to be disappointing because with everything I just use cypress mulch.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so just
even with your ackies.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I know you used to have those tubs.
The cattle troughs, those big, I would put sand in the bottom of those.
Yeah.
But man, like I've got enough stuff now that if I had to scoop out all that sand on like even an annual basis and replace it all, I'd never stop working. I can't do that, right? So I just moved to nest boxes now for everything, and so the enclosure has like 1.5 to 2-inch layer of cypress mulch on as ground covering, and I like that because it smells good. It's slightly antiseptic, right? The pH of it makes it slightly antiseptic. It's not dusty. The monitors look good when they're on it. And then in the nest boxes now for the Odatria, dude, I just literally use King's play sand from Home Depot. I go and buy a bunch of those bags. It's nice, clean play sand. They all use it. They all nest in it. They'll hide in the nest box. And then for the tree monitors, the same deal. Just cypress mulch as ground covering. I'll throw some leaves in there from the forest, like Greg was saying. But their nest boxes, though, are like a combination of soil and sand and peat moss. Just kind of a eyeballed 3-way mix, and that's it. But yeah, I mean, it's to have like 12 inches of substrate. I mean, they'd probably burrow in it, but like I had ackies on that, and they didn't seem to like, it wasn't part of their everyday thing where they dig tunnels, hide in tunnels and stuff, right? So
I found the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I asked, because I saw you put it very thickly, and
I used to keep it thick, and I was like, "There's no point. This is it's just made it's just heavy. It's a pain in the butt. That was all it was. Yeah.
So I don't do that anymore. Well, it hasn't it hasn't proven to be necessary. And then they still have the area where they can dig in the nest box if they want to just dig it outside in a moist microclimate, right? So
yeah, I found my savannah and the whitethroat dug way more than
that makes
sense. And Kimberly's and stuff. Yeah, and which makes sense. That's the but yeah. So for that like my savannah now she's gigantic, right? So I can't give her enough substrate to bury herself in.
Yeah.
But she likes she likes digging for food.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they'll all dig for food and stuff, right? Like, but I could imagine that's like huge on the savannah monitor's repertoire of foraging behaviors. Is
and she'll just like bury her nose in the sand and walk along, just rubbing her head back and forth just through the sand. It's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch.
Well, you got to imagine if they're eating like a lot of the arthropods, like even centipedes and scorpions. And even if they're in a slightly more humid area, like worms and things like that, right? They're going to be digging things up. So that's a good one to try for your savannas, earthworms.
Yeah, I should actually. That would be. She'd go bananas for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she jumped for Fatty recently.
Really cool to watch. Yeah. Actually, very cool to watch.
Get yourself a big tub of soil and then just put your Canadian night crawlers in there and let them reproduce.
I have tried to get a little breeding colony of night crawlers. It was a couple of years ago now, a few years back, when we were doing some stuff with some newts, because I was wanting baby worms to be feeding off to baby newts. And I wasn't good at it. So I kept forgetting them.
I spoke to a few people about it afterwards, and I believe we may have been using the wrong species of worm.
Oh, really?
I believe. Yeah, I could be wrong.
Well, I still couldn't keep the worm alive, whether the amphibian would have eaten it or not.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It.
They have to be cold.
What's that?
They have to be cold.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I also
they like it
to warm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I kept forgetting to throw food in because it was in a bin off to the side, Yeah. And so my colony didn't do terribly well.
Yeah, they need it pretty cool, I think, to do anything. But I mean, if there's a company in Windsor that specializes like a giant worm farm. You just order thousands of them from them. Yeah.
There's a place here, a guy here that does vermiculture. Yeah. So I got some European night crawlers. I was like, oh, sure.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Yeah, so it didn't go well for me.
They breathe faster.
Yeah. It's your turn to try it this time.
I would imagine your savannah would probably like the earthworms, right? And then they're a good composting tool. Just all your kitchen vegetable scraps, throw it in there. They'll chow it, right?
Yeah.
So then they're to go.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? Like. It's I feel like I've got enough projects at the moment.
The reptile hobby, never enough projects.
Yeah.
Never enough things on the go.
The addiction.
Yeah.
That's correct. That is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
No, and sure. I guess another question I have is what since you're on the tree monitor, I'll say kick your thing you're focusing on so much. Are there other species that are really accessible within? We'll say the hobby?
Tree monitors.
Yeah, I know there are some other species out there, but I don't hear about.
Well, I mean, yeah, those are the 6 species that are, let's say, the known ones in Indonesia. There's the Keith Horneye in northern Australia, which is to the Bomii and Bakari. I mean, there could be undiscovered species out there for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know, right? Like I was talking to somebody in the Philippines, and they were talking about a few species of tree monitor in the Philippines, and I'm like, what? Like, you know, like the typical green tree monitors. Like, yeah, that size, but just not green. Like they're just different types here. I'm like, what? So I mean, there's so many variations. I mean, the reality is those tree monitors are just they're just recent descendants from one another in the archipelago. They all were one species at one time. I'm pretty sure of that. And then their isolation on the individual islands with rising sea levels caused them to change slightly, but that hasn't been too long in evolutionary history. I mean, the damn things will all interbreed too, right? Like I could breed a green tree with a blue tree without any problem, I'm sure. I've never done it. So, you know, I know people that have.
I'm gonna clip him just saying I can't do it, and that's
So, that'll be the clickbait.
Yeah. And on that note, is there any? I guess you've kept a lot of different species at this point. Is there like a holy grail monitor that you haven't kept yet that you'd like to?
Well, I mean, I'd love to keep some parenti monitors or some Varanus glebopalma, which is another small. They're like a miniature parenti from Australia. Cool. So they have a lot of the same patterning and markings as a parenti. They're just like Tristis size or a bit bigger than Tristis.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So
do they have that gorgeous neck?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they're really nice. I mean, they're really nice.
You're all about that neck, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, look at mine. Look at mine.
I've heard they're in Europe though, so I think it's like all of this stuff. I mean, you know, it's a matter of time before they're maybe available or somebody says, yeah, I actually have these things, you know?
Yeah.
Like heck, I mean, I deal a lot with Japan and Korea. I mean, I was offered a pair of parenti monitors like 15 years ago from Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I obviously don't have them. I wouldn't have got them, but like, you know, their people have these things.
Yeah.
It's just the legality of them and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool species though.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be really nice if like the Toronto Zoo if you could work in partnership with like the Toronto Zoo or a CASA accredited facility that could get a pair of them and you could work with them, right?
That would be sick.
You know, I know I was the Indian River Reptile Zoo years ago. I remember talking to Brian Loyce that owns that, and when he was accredited, I'm not sure if he still is or not. But when he was accredited, that was one of the things I was like, man, go get some parentis. You know, I'd love to like see those things in person and maybe chip in with some breeding knowledge if we could do something. You know, that'd be great. But
that'd be so cool.
Is that now what's called the Canada's Dinosaur Park?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it worth checking out? I'm putting him on the spot. Is it worth checking out?
Oh, it's cool. It's a cool place, man. I take my kids there every summer.
Okay,
right?
We drive by it all the time, and we've never known if like, oh, should we stop and check it out or not?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure about the reptile area on the inside with all the live specimens of reptiles. Like that's pretty cool, even too. He's like built it up over years. So he has some like crocs in there, and he has all sorts of different stuff.
Cool.
And so it's.
I actually just thought it was fake dinosaurs outside. I didn't think. I didn't realize there was.
You see a big sign that says reptiles on the side of it, but
I just thought it was like trying to just advertise that, like, not all the statues are dinosaurs. Some are reptiles.
No, he actually. That place was originally just a reptile zoo where you could go inside. There was the gift shop, and then you could tour the facility, and he had it all set up. He'd do a lap, and you could see all the different reptiles in there. That's what it originally started.
Okay.
Afterthought. So the dinosaurs came after the original reptile zoo, and so I mean, you know, they've expanded it quite a bit in the back too. Like in the summer, they have the tortoises outside and stuff, and it's kind of neat. Although the dinosaurs scared the crap out of my kids when they were young. When I first got them, my daughters were petrified.
Well, we'll have to stop there sometime
Yeah,
on the way.
check it out. For sure.
Yeah.
Way to an expo or something.
Mm-hmm.
I did hear rumor of you working with some croc monitors.
Where'd you hear that?
I was wondering if
I heard that on another podcast.
Yeah, I got a couple croc monitors.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I've always shied away from the bigger stuff. I've just, I don't know. I mean, I've had some pretty cool bigger monitors in the past, like Spencer's monitors and Merton's water monitors and stuff. I just never felt that I never felt that I did them enough justice, let's say, right? Yeah. Especially the Mertens, man. I was not a fan of the big water feature and stuff like that. Like, it's a whole other level of commitment to work and stuff, right?
No, it is. Totally is.
The Spencers were okay. It's just, it ended up the Spencers that I ended up having, they ended up both being male. They were sold to me as a pair, and they looked like a pair physically, but you know, in time, you know, when I had them separated out, they were like, the female turned into a male for the most part. So that's what happened. It wasn't actually a female; it just suppressed its male.
Yeah, just became a
subordinate male.
Yeah.
So, but they were actually, those ones were given to me on a breeding loan from a guy that had them out in BC. He's like, I want you to breed these things for me. I'm like, all right, send them over. And then very quickly I realized that they probably weren't a pair. Right? So that wasn't any money out of pocket, but he had bought them as a pair. So that sucked for him, but it is what it is. So when I realized they were two males, I was like, you need to take these things back. They're taking up some real estate. And I wasn't too keen on trying to buy a female anywhere or anything.
Yeah. Well, then you're running down a whole other rabbit hole at that point.
Right. I think it's important to stay somewhat focused, you know?
Yeah.
But anyways, the croc monitors, it's like, you know, the tree monitors are doing really well. There's a huge cult following for croc monitors, although they probably shouldn't be. You know?
Yeah, it's a funny catch, that one.
I've heard they're like one of the most, I guess, one of the hardest species to work with, one of the most dangerous monitors. Is it true?
I don't think they're hard. I don't think they're particularly hard. I mean, there's just as many people breeding croc monitors as there is, let's say, any of the other tree monitors, and it's just because the knowledge base is becoming greater and greater. So I don't think they're particularly hard. I think they're just a big tree monitor, to be honest. But they're dangerous. I mean, they can be really dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the variable is the danger.
Right.
And then like it's easy to have a fear of them when you're working with them, right? And then that just makes the whole situation even worse, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I see pictures of guys, you know, cuddling up with their croc.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just, I mean, that's a whole level of trust that I don't think I'll ever get to. Let's put it that way.
Because I imagine it's a lot of work.
Yeah, but it's, well, part of it is too, like a lot of those monitors that do that, they're just so obese. They're lazy, right?
Yeah.
I've seen that a number of times too, right? It's not that the monitor's tame, it's just too fat to move, right? Yeah. And it's just, you know, it's just kind of shut down. It's just big and lazy. But if you have a lean, healthy croc monitor, I mean, they're fast and
big. And they got crazy ass teeth on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just say if you get bitten, it's probably game over for that body part if it's an adult, you know, like literally. So I don't ever plan to like interact with them like these other people do. And then the other is it's like, okay, you do breed them. What do you do, right? It's like
that's kind of the next question, you know, where
literally they can, even a little one, if it bites you, can cause serious damage and tendon damage and all that stuff. So it's like you're now on the venting the customer scale as the same you would with a venomous reptile, right? It's like I can't sell this to you, right? This isn't just a pet anymore. I mean, this is a pet. This is a project for me because I've experience with monitors, and I mean, I've always considered ever since I started tree monitors, I've always considered croc monitors, and only now is like, okay, I've done a lot of the tree monitors. Let me give these things a whirl. But I mean, I'm not, I'm not a fool either. I know I don't want to lose a couple digits on my finger because I was complacent with them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, a lot.
They're beautiful to look at, though.
They are, but a lot of people do a lot of dumb stuff with reptiles, and they can get away with it with some, but with a croc monitor, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I like with the ones that I have, I'm going to build like a big, enclosure outside for the summer for them, just like to really experience this massive tree lizard, and then their enclosures. I mean, again, you could build a 20-foot tall by 20-foot long enclosure, and it's still not going to be big enough for the damn thing, probably. Yeah. Right? So,
let alone a pair. Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I don't think they're. I mean, there's people breeding them. There's several people that have produced them in the U.S. and in Europe, and they're. I think if you have some experience with monitors, and temperatures and feeding and all that sort of stuff, and incubation, I don't think crocs are any different. They're just a bigger version of tree monitor. But although having said that, they seem even there like at the next tier of intelligence, though, right? Like if humans weren't around, they might dominate the world.
Yeah, they have a different look in their eye.
Oh man, buddy.
When I saw someone's, it just kind of, just a different, almost like that. I remember many moons ago, dealing with some elephants up close, and there was a certain look in their eye that I saw in the croc monitor.
Intelligence,
that was just different from so many other things.
That's part of that was part of the debate on getting them, because they are so intelligent. You really you feel for them at a personal level, so you really have to do them right. You know what I mean? Because they're, it's not like you can see it in their eyes if they're not happy. You can, you can just sense it. So you have to, you really have to do them right if you're going to commit to doing them, I think. And whereas others, other species of lizards and stuff, they just don't have that emotional or connection to the keeper, right? Like, it's like a dog. You can see when your dog's miserable or whatever, right? It's like that's so you have to really, you really have to do them right. And
be aware of that. Yeah.
And then to get them to breed, they have to be, like any monitor, but like the tree monitors and crocodile monitors, they're, you have to kind of cater to their cognitive ability, right? I think so.
So very white is what you're doing,
right? The more intelligent the reptile, let's say, the more difficult it is to breed. There's that positive correlation there, right? So with monitors, that's why they're notoriously difficult to breed, because they're really smart relative to a leopard gecko, right?
Right.
And if things aren't right for them, they just won't do it. Right. Whereas a leopard gecko may,
regardless of the conditions it's breeding.
Right. Yeah, to some degree, right? I mean, obviously.
Oh yeah, of course. If it's on its deathbed, it's not. But yeah.
Yeah, they have to have a certain temperature parameter and stuff. That's well dialed in for leopard geckos. But I mean, they'll breed in a tub with newspaper. So as long as they have food and the right temperature to keep them going on that cycle, they'll do it.
Any more?
Yeah, I have a million questions, but I don't have any right now.
Okay, so maybe we'll wrap it up there then. Brandon, thank you very, 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 very much for coming on and doing this. This was a super interesting episode. Man. And I had zero information about monitors, and now I feel like I have maybe 1%. Not that I learned a lot, but I'm sure there's so much more to dive into. But yeah, super fascinating animals for sure. I see why you have fallen for them very hard, and I see why you have been working with them for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
Soon enough, I will have one.
I know a guy.
Do you? I
know a guy.
Well, yeah. I think I might as well. I think I might know what you're talking about. Bradley, can you let everyone know where they can find you if they want to keep up, and where they can find you if they want to buy some monitors?
Yeah, most of my like interaction now is either through my Canadian Coldblood Facebook page or Canadian Coldblood on Instagram. I have a website, but it's archaic, and I've been meaning to redo it. So hopefully I can get to that soon. Hint, Greggy.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. So I want to redo that website and have, more of, a better photo gallery of individual animals and stuff like that. Right. So, but yeah, those are the two main: Instagram, Facebook. You could check out my website. You can email me, Brandon at CanadianColdblood.com. And but anytime something, for the most part, unless it's like happening all the time, I post pictures of things hatching on Facebook and Instagram. And speaking of which, I'll post those pilbaras that just hatched on Instagram when we're done here. Yeah. But yeah, so that's where you can find me. Sometimes I'm always at CRBE too, but sometimes I'll go to the monthly shows as well. So it all depends on what's going on here. But yeah.
Awesome. And you can find all those links in the description or the show notes or whatever you want to call them. Go check them out. Go give them a follow. And that's a wrap on our first monitor episode. I want to quickly say thanks again to Brandon of Canadian Coldblood for coming on and teaching us all that awesome information. And to Greg for being an awesome co-host. That's Greg from Beneath the Canopy Exotics. And to all of you guys, thank you for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you on the next one.